Today's scripture brings us to the book of 1 Samuel. Now, before we get into chapter 1, I want to lay some groundwork for the book just so you understand where we are in history, as this is a historical book. It tells events of history throughout it. Now, prior to 1 Samuel, the children of Israel, let's just kind of go back to Egypt, when they were enslaved in Egypt and God used Moses to bring them out. He would bring them out. They would spend time in the wilderness. And then after that time in the wilderness, God would use Joshua to bring him into the promised land. Once they were in the promised land, they were under what's called a government of theocracy. There was no king, and what would happen is God was their king. When they disobeyed God, God would bring other nations in to reprove them. And then when they'd crowd unto God, then God would deliver them. And that took, the time of the judges was about 300 years total. And 1 Samuel picks up toward the tail end of that era, because the book of Samuel covers about a 90-year point of history from the end of the time of the judges through the reign of the first king Saul. So it would change from a theocracy under the time of judges to a kingdom, a traditional monarchy with a king, an earthly king, ruling over the people in this book. That being said, we are in chapter 1 going to witness the events leading up to the birth of the last judge. Samuel would be the last judge of the children of Israel, and the things that took place there. So in chapter 1, I have it divided out into 3 sections. The first is verses 1 through 8, and I have that titled Worship, Wickedness, and Waiting. Because in these few verses right here, you see a few things. You see that Elkanah, Hannah's husband, which would be Samuel's father, he's faithful to the house of God, and he's faithful to the things of God. And he goes up, the Bible tells us, year after year, year by year in verse number 7, to sacrifice and worship God. We also see wickedness, and that is found in Peninnah. I think that's how you say her name. If it's not, it's close enough. This is one of Elkanah's wives. And I say wickedness because what she is doing to Hannah is just wicked. She had children, but she's mocking Hannah for having none. That might have been because Elkanah was playing favorites, whatever. But, this is not an episode of Sister Wives. I like the word that it used in there, when her adversary. That's found in verse number 6. That's the way it describes the sister wife, right? So it was her adversary. And I can imagine if I had more than one wife, my wife would not be buddies with her. It would certainly be an adversary. So we see that, and in verses 9 through 18, you have Hannah prays for a child. Hannah goes to the house of God there, and she's praying for a child. She is barren. And 2 things that I want to point out right here. Number 1 is demonstrating her dependency on God. She is barren. She has been barren year after year, but she keeps depending on God, and she's calling out to God, and she's trusting that He will deliver. And, that's pretty much all she could do. And then number 2, when we see Eli's response, his initial response, this begins to tell us why the spiritual state of Israel is so low, because this is the man, this is the judge, who is kind of head of the nation. He's not a king, but he's a judge, and he's head of the nation, and he's spiritually inept. We don't only see it here, but we see it later on. But Eli thinks she's drunk. She's praying, and he thinks she's drunk. So it kind of shows his spiritual perception in Eli there. Now, by the time this chapter starts and the time it ends, we're going to see she went from barren to having a child. And I want to make note of the things that took place that you could attribute to the change therein. Number 1, she was broken. She was broken unto her state. Listen, God hears a broken heart. He truly does. And she was broken. We see that she prayed. We not only see that she prayed, but she fasted. And then she promised a consecration of her child. She was broken. She prayed. She fasted. And she said, God, if you will give me, and she was specific. She didn't say a child. She didn't say a healthy child. She said, you give me a male child. I will give him back unto you. And she promised consecration unto the Lord. I got more on that in just a second. But then in verse 19 through the remainder of the chapter, we see that Hannah keeps her promise. After weaning the child, she goes and gives her child up. At this point, kind of spoiling the ending for you, but at this point, she only has one. And it's the one that she's been praying for. It's the one she's been waiting for. It's the one that she had after she was barren for so long. And now she goes to give it up. Not only does she go to give it up, but she goes to give it a sacrifice with it as well. And she brings oxen up and she is sacrificing unto God. She's praising God as she's giving up her child unto God. Can you imagine how hard that would be? How hard it would be to give your child up unto the Lord. She said right there, verse number 22, but Hannah went not up. She said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. She had no illusion as to taking him up there for a little bit and coming and getting him right back. She was giving him up forever. Now, it would have been very easy for Hannah to, once she had received the blessing of God, to renege on her promise, to just change her mind and say, I got it. I'm not going through with that now. It could have been very easy. And in fact, I believe that's what a lot of Christians do. They pray and they pray and they pray, and then God blesses in a mighty way. And then, that vow I made, sorry, Lord, I ain't doing that. But Hannah didn't. She kept her promise unto God. And thank God for that. Samuel was a great leader. He was the one who God used to anoint King David. And let me close with this. And that is, the best thing that we can do is to give our children unto the Lord. Wholly, forever. Not just on Sundays. Not just kind of when it's convenient, but forever. Say, God, here they are. You gave them to me. I'm giving them back to you. It's the best thing that we could do, not only for our children, but for ourselves, as you'll see that God's not through blessing Hannah. Until next time, don't read ahead. Well, you can if you want to, but you'll see just how God blesses her tremendously. I'm glad we serve the God that we do. Hope this has been a help to you. God bless, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.